Kakuzu vs. Pain was at one point in time the most debated and discussed Naruto topic, so much so that even now you'll still notice many people trying to argue as to why their side is the superior. However, today I want to settle the question of who actually wins this fight and why it's not as close as it's ever been made out to be. Kakuzu, upon his introduction, is first displayed alongside Hidan, his partner, as the new two, although this brief sense of ambiguity would soon be replaced with a sense of respect when Kakuzu and Hidan managed to fight off the Tokubetsu Jonin and Team 10 at the same time, where they would even finish off Asuma Saratobi, a former Guardian 12 shinobi and a highly respected Jonin whose true power is stated to be close to Kakashi in the first databook. That also actually states that Kakashi is the strongest Jonin in the village, making it so that Asuma in his close quarters combat is relative to even the peak of shinobi in Konoha, and despite this, Hidan, the inferior of the two, is still able to throw his three-bladed scythe whilst upside down in a backflip and evading both Shikamaru's shadow possession and Asuma's blade. This being a feat that could also then translate to Kakuzu, who albeit is relative to Hidan in some instances, such as when they react at the same time opening the Kakashi fight and when they run at the same speed against Shiryu, but Kakuzu is still the stronger of the two, which is more supported by how Hidan states that Kakuzu is usually the doer of the two in their Bijou capture, which should be like the highlight of their fighting and things like that, which could also be shown during the Kakashi fight, where Kakuzu was able to grab Kakashi with his strings and toss him to the ground, with the anime also extending their taijutsu clashes to make them nearly equals. However, this isn't what makes Kakuzu so strong and why he's seen as a better fit matchup for Pain in comparison to most of the Akatsuki members. That would actually be due to his 5 hearts, which allow for him to not only himself to, battle an opponent, but 4 other autonomous chakra creatures who each have their own respective nature releases that have been carefully chose by Kakuzu throughout his 90 plus years of experience, which also prompts Shikamaru of all people to call him quite the tactician, which the databook supplements as well. This ninjutsu mastery could be made evident through how his wind style's heart pressure damage can destroy Kakashi's jacket and be compared to a natural disaster in the 3rd databook. The fire heart can also dish out large-scale jutsu to occupy multiple opponents, and it can also easily overpower Kakashi's water wall when enhanced with wind style. The strongest of all hearts, though, would be his lightning-quick false darkness, which can equal out 2 of Kakashi's Raikiri at the same time. These hearts can even fly, as shown in the War Arc, which also further corroborates how the anime portrays them flying around whilst spamming tons of jutsu like bullets and things like that. All this can happen whilst Kakuzu himself is covered in his favored Earth-style Diamond Morph Jutsu, which grants him the ability to harden any part of his skin in exchange for that part's mobility. For example, Kakuzu, he can harden his entire upper body against Choji's ball, except he just can't move. He hardens his hands when he wants to increase his potency of his attacks or reflect them in hopes to mitigate some strength, such as when he hardens his hand against the kunai bombs and things like that. Now, whilst many of these jutsu are stronger than what Kakashi has to offer, he can still react to all of these attacks, with them even intercepting him on numerous occasions, such as when he's against the fastest of the which being the lightning heart, the other faster version of Kakuzu after merging with his hearts, where Kakashi can intercept and cut Kakuzu's tendrils to save Naruto, who by this point is also relative to Kakashi, with him actually conceding this. Although Naruto likely hasn't surpassed the Sannin yet, seeing as Naruto admits direct inferiority to base heavy Sasuke prior to the Kakuzu battle, just after recovering from when Sasuke perception blitzed both him and Sakura, which still gets confirmed after the Kakuzu fight, where Naruto still believes that he actually is inferior to Sasuke and that his performance here was a sort of test for him trying to reach Sasuke's level. This same Sasuke was able to be reacted to by Orochimaru on his deathbed, which is also just consistent with how the Naruto Storm Generations game makes it a point that Naruto couldn't even land a scratch on base Jiraiya after the Kakuzu arc, and this would be the same Jiraiya who was chosen to be Hokage over Kakashi twice, which fits with his greater quantity of missions and things along those lines that just help his title of a Sannin. However, upon given the task of taking down Pain, he realizes that this base power definitely isn't enough, and he actually will require his Sage mode, which he attributes to Pain's power to be somewhere above Hanzo's, who could be all 3 Sannin previously due to Pain obviously just killing him. Jiraiya then proclaims that he's no longer going to be of the Prodigal 3, but the Hermit Sage of Mount Miyaboku, giving us a directly verifiable reason as to why even the weaker paths of Pain are also just beyond any single Kage of the time, and nearly any shinobi in the world, which would fit with several noteworthy and consistent statements for Pain, such as how the 3rd data book states, quote, "The shinobi of the Akatsuki joined with his own expectations. These shinobi who have the skill and talent to battle 1,000 men at once, why would they join an organization and obey Pain in capturing the tailed beast? The reason is Pain's charisma and power that no one can deny." End quote. Which would imply that every Akatsuki member would obey Pain because either his charisma and his power, although the statement is assigning 2 attributes to Pain. The first is charisma, and the second is power that no one can deny, which singles out power, giving it an additional qualitative value, meaning that every member obeys him because of his power, which might fit with his other statement that's similar that also calls him the Akatsuki's invincible leader. Even the notoriously strong members obey him. End quote, which does seem to be power correlated, seeing as it asserts something to Pain's power and gives a similar attribute to the members who are considered strong, yet Pain is considered invincible. So either way, you have to accept that each Akatsuki member who are strong enough to battle both Biju and Jinchuriki alike are capable of fighting even 1,000 men at once as well if needed. They simply obey Pain due to his power, as it's so vastly above theirs they couldn't possibly deny it. This would also fit with how he's called immortal, invincible, unbeatable, and someone so powerful that he's revered as a god throughout his entire arc by characters like Konan, who shut down Obito's questioning of Pain's ability to defeat Naruto based on his attack that can take down 2 of Kakuzu's hearts at the same time, where Konan just brushes it off, saying that Pain's never lost a battle, which fits again with the entire 3rd data book and its similar remarks as well, making it so that all the characters introduced prior to chapter 402 are subject to these statements. However, there can be exceptions to this depending on how you interpret both Itachi and Obito, considering both of them have arguments to place them above Pain, meaning that some statements could simply be in reference to all those who would oppose Pain, which could include any Kage, Sannin, Akatsuki member, things along those lines, and this wouldn't include either Itachi or Obito, seeing as Obito restrains from any fight that could potentially result in a loss, seeing as his goal is only depending on him, and his fight with Minato nearly killed him, which is kind of, why he took such a lackadaisical approach following that battle, where Obito now hesitates to display any of his true power, and hence to why the 3rd data book has him alongside characters like Minato and Hashirama, where they all have question marks for their stats. Itachi is a spy and likely wouldn't ever oppose Pain in such a manner. However, there are ways to interpret Pain above Itachi, such as how Itachi obeys Pain and even corrects Kisame's defiance with him calling Pain their leader, where he then just kind of, trusts their duo to follow through with Pain's orders and bringing, in Deidara to the organization, which would support the notion that Itachi does obey Pain because of his power, which could be supplemented with how Pain is regarded as the strongest man in the Akatsuki by the weekly release statement for chapter 364, which shouldn't really contradict anything either, regardless of your interpretations of both Obito and Itachi's ability to beat Pain in a fight, seeing as Pain does display much better sheer strength feats, such as how a second state Sage Jiraiya, which is essentially like where Jiraiya dons more face paint and frog-like features through obtaining more nature energy, where the Preta Path could still actually catch that version of Jiraiya's strongest attack, being the Big Ball Rasengan, prior to absorbing it. The human path individually is able to catch Jiraiya's Sage Mode punch whilst his eyes were closed and his back was turned. The Ashura path, unlike either the human or Preta, is implied to be one of the more physical paths, as he not only rips Jiraiya's arm off in his initial Sage Mode, but which he does still proclaim to be above his Sannin variant entirely, but the Ashura path is also just shown fully intercepting Kakashi's top speed, which is noted to be aided by a mental lamp in the chapter synopsis statement, where he then tanks a a Raikiri to its spinal cord. Now, while yes, it did penetrate him, it never went through the spine, which it was hitting, showing some really impressive durability and hence strength showings for Pain, especially in comparison to Kakuzu, whose Diamond Morph was pierced straight through by the Raikiri. And again, although, Kakashi was generally being overpowered through a large portion of the Kakuzu battle, he was always keeping up speed-wise, something Kakashi couldn't really replicate as much on a very fatigued Pain, who actually entered into the entire Leaf Village using several jutsu like his Soul Steel ability, Laser Beam Blast, and animal summons like his Centipede, Ox, Rhino, and things along those lines. And that's all before he goes in to use his Chaotic Shinra Tensei. That was actually so powerful that the second fan book implies the Diva Path used all of its available chakra, hence to why he relies on the other paths to protect him in his battle against Kakashi. Yet this stronger Kakashi is much more willing to use Kamui more than once, something he kept as a last resort move against Kakuzu, as he didn't even need it, and implied he could have won if he decided to use it. Pain's statement of either being invincible in comparison to the Akatsuki members or just being the strongest man in the Akatsuki would also just include Deidara, who is noted to be one of the stronger members according to Kisame, a note not made when Kakuzu died, which would ultimately be consistent with how once again, Heavy Sasuke would scale above Naruto and his Kakuzu fight self, especially in his Sharingan curse mark state, as Naruto only thinks of his base state, not his curse mark state, which Orochimaru taunts Naruto by stating that Sasuke, likely in his curse mark state, is leagues above Three Tails Naruto, which would be supplemented with some chapter art if you don't immediately assert that Orochimaru is either lying or exaggerating. Regardless, off the basis of Sasuke's perception blitzing of Naruto without his Sharingan, and his Sharingan Curse Mark 2 states that, likely offering a greater increase in power in comparison to Naruto's Rasen Shuriken training, CM2 Sasuke should definitely be above Naruto and the Kakuzu who he beat. However, in regards to Deidara, this isn't quite the case, as after Sasuke escapes the encapsulated C4, he's then glancing out to the left at Deidara whilst he's soaring out in the wrong direction, meaning he then has to use his flight propulsion to then reach Deidara as fast as possible, where he then closes his hand to cup it more to get more speed where he's flying, where he then also activates a Chidori to then increase his speed already and help him get there. And yet still, a drained Deidara with not even enough clay to make a proper bomb or palm-sized bird entirely, and still having to channel chakra for the C4 through a right-hand tiger with slower reaction time due to fatigue, can react to a Chidori CM2 Sharingan Sasuke, who does still have enough chakra to suppress Orochimaru and use Chidori. Yet Sasuke simply wasn't fast enough to hit Deidara whilst flying in the air. Now, you may be quick to criticize Sasuke being in the air and if he's actually all that fast, and I would like to point out that this flying Chidori move is actually a pivotal move in Sasuke's arsenal and is proportionally fast in comparison to his regular stats, as shown when he needed to use a move far beyond his own speed against Gaara in chapter 128, where this Chidori jump is at least faster than his fireball within that state, and therefore a CM2 Sharingan Heavy Sasuke's fireball might not be fast enough to hit Deidara either, meaning that Deidara's reaction speed is even beyond that. Then even earlier in chapter 127, we have an earlier example of Sasuke using this move as well, where Gaara is outpacing Sasuke consistently, if not for the Sharingan and Chidori in charges like this, demonstrating how this is nearly always faster than a regular Sasuke, and is a move he uses when needing to hit someone faster than himself. Again, it's consistent for there to not be a speed drop for Sasuke when performing this move, as shown in chapter 389 as well against his brother Itachi when trying to capitalize quickly on his previous successful attack of the Rig Shuriken, which dropped Itachi to a knee. Therefore, while I probably wouldn't claim that Deidara is faster than a Sharingan Chidori CM2 Heavy Sasuke, I want to preface that when reanalyzing the fight, you'll notice that if you think about the initial section a bit more and couple this feat, you can notice a lot of supplementary details to support this relativity to just, CM2 Sasuke in general, such as when Deidara is able to perceive and react to CM2 Sasuke pulling the strings for the shuriken behind him, where he could, couldn't even react via, moving his giant bird. Once, even once the dragon falls, just before the dragon actually hits the ground, Deidara and CM2 Sasuke react relatively through Deidara catching a foothold and kicking one of the shuriken out and somehow removing the other to then toss off the cloak while Sasuke weaves signs for, the bodily snakes to save himself, yet Deidara in all that time also had to summon the bird that he's standing on through some hand movements which might have been made a little more difficult due to the injuries to his arm, showing once again that they should be moving somewhat comparably. And also, just a quick note, if you are enjoying the video, then please, by all means, hit the subscribe button. It helps me out a ton and lets me know you guys do enjoy this content. Another note people will use to downplay Deidara's relativity to Sasuke, almost hitting him from a long distance in the beginning of the fight where it first opens. However, while Sasuke covered a much greater initial distance, Deidara covered a much greater distance from that point afterward where Sasuke draws a sword using combat speed. But anyway, while that may have felt a little tangential going into the Deidara section, it at least means that Pain is certainly stronger and faster than Kakuzu through his lore and statements as well, especially through that gap between CM2 Sasuke and that base Sasuke and then hence Kakuzu. So leaving only really two outlets to say that Pain isn't going to be blitzing around Kakuzu's hearts. The first of which would be derived from the war arc, where we could see that Kakuzu is carrying Nagato on his shoulder, yet keeping up with Edo Itachi in travel speed, whilst also in Edo. However, asserting relativity between them is simply nearly impossible, seeing as Kabuto literally displayed every Edo Tensei moving at literally the same speed, and the reason as to why it is not because they actually were the same speed, it's just rather that it's in Kabuto's best interest to have all of his fighters arrive at once within unison, not at some random places where one character would arrive first, get jumped by the entire alliance, and then another to follow. An example of this would be Kabuto retracting Deidara from Turtle Island when he could have caused havoc there, but instead he would rather have Deidara advance onto the battlefield alongside his other soldiers. We're also made aware that the command implanted in their heads to send them to said battlefield is not a command requiring their full power or speed, but instead is actually a command to force them to act at the highest level of efficiency in accomplishing a task. Itachi is blatantly a really good blatant example of what I'm talking about. We could see that when he first pulls up on Naruto and B alongside Nagato, he remains within his 3 Tomoe state, while fighting a KCM1 Naruto and Killer B. Itachi was capable of parrying off all of their attacks, yet later we could see that, Itachi under a different command was actually able to utilize his MS to allow for him to actually blitz around Nagato, who could blitz around both B and KCM1 Naruto at the same time, meaning that Itachi initially opened in 3 Tomoe, despite having much easier ways of blitzing KCM1 Naruto and B, due to him not having to struggle with those two as shown, where Itachi could still backflip 3 times before B can even finish his surprise attack and things like that. So for one, the command of them, going at full speed just doesn't work. Characters also do this outside of commands, like in the Kaguya fight where Naruto and Ko all are running at the same travel speed, despite Kakashi obviously being slower than 6 past Sage Mode Naruto. So Kakuzu is not relative in speed to Edo Itachi. The second and more formulated argument for Kakuzu's higher scaling or whatever is through Kakuzu and Hidan's encounter with Yugito Ni, where we can notice a few things. The most important of the which being that Kakuzu reacted to Matatabi's downward paw strike, which albeit did sink him into the ground. Anyway though, he couldn't, even though he couldn't equalize its force, he could still put his hands up reacting to her combat speed. However, this reaction speed does require a bit of analysis to actually assert Kakuzu fully scales to Matatabi. First, let's note her initial position when fully transformed. Kakuzu is standing slightly in front of Hidan, and both of them are still a solid distance from Matatabi's standing position. Both of Matatabi's paws are stabilized near her mid-knee section, with the left one being closer to Hidan and Kakuzu's position than the right one. On the next page, we can then see that Yugito has now primed her hand back and is ready to strike, in which it's blatantly shown now that the aforementioned right paw is all the way behind her head, fully extended, where Kakuzu sometime during that draw time was able to simply put his hands up. So obviously, Kakuzu isn't reacting to her full combat speed, since we know that her right hand went from knee level all the way to full extension behind the head, where it then fully extends again down to strike Kakuzu, which means that he is reacting to the drawback of her paw as well, and more so, not just the attack speed itself. An example I've given before for this is, imagine me and you are in a boxing ring. I'm a far better boxer than you speed-wise. I then want to hit you with a very strong blow and wind my arm back all the way down to my ass, completely, rotating for a big ol' haymaker. You can then see my arm wind it up before the attack is actually set in motion and react then. This follows the exact same concept here. Kakuzu is only really scaling to the drawback speed itself, if you're being generous, not just the strike itself. The next problem is that when you actually try to connect this pulse strike to the one used on KCM1 Naruto in the war when Yugito was actually in her V2 state, Naruto is still recovering from the prior attack and then simply tanked her attack. This is also after B already notes that they are fighting quite differently due to the Sharingan and Rinnegan projections. Killer B and Yugito Ni are both from Kumo Gakure, representing both the 8 and 2 tails respectively, hence to why Yugito's name Ni translates to second, likely talking about its second to the 8 tails, which is fitting with how the previous Jinchuriki's funeral. The Kumo citizens make it a note that the 8 tails has always been more destructive than the 2 tails, and that they don't really have like a special gourd either in trying to seal the 2 tails. Something shown to A though when A the fourth when he was much younger and in contention for Raikage, yet in the tour around the village we still don't get a remark about anything or anything at all to put away the 2 tails, only the 8 tails. Killer B is also noted to be better at harnessing his Bijou power than almost any of the other Jinchuriki, and yet still, the Taka Sasuke who takes down Killer B has been on the move for over 40 chapters, yet is still implied to be likely inferior to Sage and Naruto on the basis that he fought and beat Pain. However, we know that Pain is still stated to have power beyond Naruto's in Sage mode using the chapter synopsis statement, which can also fit with how Pain can react to Naruto's Sage mode kicks even whilst off guard, and having a full taijutsu scuffle in the air with the animal path alone according to the anime. The Preta path can intercept, the Rasen shurikens, which are usually a speed beyond Naruto's regular speed as they are a projectile. The highly competitive fight between the two actually prompts Shikaku, the smartest man in the village, to show Shikamaru that they don't have a chance at all, and they would only really get in Naruto's way, despite the fact that Shikamaru could react to Kakuzu from behind the back after noticing the shadow possession snap. This is simply consistent through how the Tokubetsu Jonin were still more than capable of planting traps for Kakuzu to catch him completely in, when we still have the Ashura path completely intercepting the Raikiri from off panel, when Kakuzu's only ever attempt at replicating this feat is when Kakashi is no longer focused on Kakuzu and has just begun to step into his run and hence hasn't really built up that speed. And then Kakuzu is still defeated by a Naruto whose eyes are just slit, when Pain was able to beat up the Sage Jiraiya who scales massively above the base one, who was beaten up by the 4 tails version of Naruto, when Pain could in fact actually battle the 6 tails Naruto, where he would then outrun him to utilize techniques like Chibaku Tensei, which he could use here if he was ever pressed into doing it, although this is unlikely all things considered. But yeah, that's the video. Pain should certainly win this matchup. I just figured I wanted to touch on the matchup since I do generally like Kakuzu more than most of the fandom and its creators. It's just that Pain is the superior. If you guys did like the video, then by all means consider subscribing. It makes this more content like this, I guess, more available. Did you guys like the shorter 20-ish minute video? But anyway, beyond that, more importantly, may God bless you all. Love you guys.